A very warm welcome to this MTSS Vlogcast series. I'm Lisa Collins, the co-founder of MTSS, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Deep Cambay, who is the founder of Regenerating Business. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at why supply chains are really vital to achieving our sustainability goals and targets. Deep, what are some of the challenges, would you say, to engage that entire supply chain in our efforts for sustainability?
It's a great question. I think, to this point, a lot of companies have been really focused on their core operations of the business. And that, when we're specifically talking environmental, that's only a small portion of your carbon footprint. The majority sits in your supply chain, where a lot of manufacturing goes on, where you're looking at the value chain through a global lens. You may have lots of suppliers all over the world. So it can be really challenging to get transparency of your supply chain. So if you're a company, a broadcasting company, for example, you may know who your direct suppliers are, who you have direct contracts with, because that's easy to identify. But going beyond that, who your suppliers are getting their resources from, not necessarily easy to see. And so, you can have lots of different tiers of supplies across your supply chain, and the more and more you go down into that, the more difficult it is to gain that transparency. You don't know what the processes, compliance, procedures are in that world. So that's a challenging area. And also secondly, when we talk about the explosion of regulation in the ESG space and the idea of, we need to collect data from our supply chain, that's also really challenging, because part of that is, how do you bring your suppliers on board, build that relationship to help them understand your journey, your objectives, what your aspirational goals are in the world of sustainability, and bring them on that journey, help them understand the types of data that you want. How do you make sure that data is verified and accurate? They need to help them understand, the reasons why. And you're not going to be the only one that's going to be asked, that is asking them for data and information. They're going to have all of their clients asking the same thing, when you think of that. So it's going to be really complex for them to get their head around, like, how can we supply the same kind of information but to all of our clients? And, at the moment, they all want the data in specific ways. So, it's very hard for suppliers to say, okay, well, they want it this way, so we'll do it this way. They don't have the capacity to do that. So how, that's going to be a challenge. And I think everyone will be working that out as we go through and start to, get more mature in kind of the world of ESG and sustainability. And also, there is an explosion of commitments when it comes to net zero. And, we'll talk at a later stage of what does net zero actually mean. But, a lot of the impact, the carbon, as I say, will sit in the supply chain, and it's about engaging your suppliers to get on that same journey, because without them, there is no way you're going to get to your net zero target. So they are going to be key components to that. So there's a lot of education, engagement that needs to happen, and building those relationships.
What recommendations then would you give to engage those suppliers effectively?
It's about building relationships. I think relationships is key, and that is, for business, as we know since the beginning of time, relationships is really important for business, but it's engaging them in a much deeper way, in kind of talking to them about risk, talking to them about opportunities. There are companies that have worked with their suppliers, outside of this particular industry, that I can give examples to. and taking inspiration from the fashion world. There are companies that have worked with their suppliers to create innovative systems to create product for their customers. There's one brand I really love, and I really admire the way that they've worked with their suppliers. So they have a supplier in Turkey. They make mud jeans, and they work with this supplier. They've created technology and innovation to create a jean that is leased or rented to the customer, that they can buy, and they can also return even damaged jeans where they can reproduce from the same material to make new jeans again. But the model is so unique because they've taken the concept of the circular economy, so bringing material back into the manufacturing process, making something new again. So they are utilizing existing material rather than sourcing virgin material, and it's a really clever model for longevity.
Presumably, people are going to have a close look at their supply chain and evaluate if it is a sustainable supply chain. For those organisations that have a supplier that maybe isn't willing to change their practices, what advice would you give?
Great question. A complex answer as always. It really depends on the significance of your supply, how much of your costs, how much of your business comes from that supplier, and looking at your procurement processes. So you can build that into your procurement requirements, looking at, what are the environmental impacts of working with you, what are the social impacts, and building that into assessing whether those suppliers are right for you, and also getting their agreement that they are aligned to your goals and targets as a business, and maybe doing an annual or every 2 years looking at reviewing their performance. Because as we start to see more and more companies in years to come, we start to see data, we start to see benchmarking and performance in a much more standardized way. Companies who are not going to be on board with that, they're going to fall away. So actually it would be beneficial, and I would definitely recommend that their procurement, to look at those procurement processes, because it's part of managing your risk in your business.
And when you're talking about alignment there, I want to make it quite clear that a lot of people think, oh, I'm a supplier and I'm an environmentally friendly supplier and I work in the same country as my customer. It's not all about the environment, is it? It's about having the same values and purpose.
Absolutely, yeah. It's looking at that bigger picture. People and environment are not two separate things. They're interrelated. You think about the pandemic, we will get more and more viruses on the planet. As the planet gets sick, that'll impact on people's health, which we are seeing that happening. Different climates are changing, so therefore places becoming uninhabitable, and therefore having to move, and therefore operations will just die out because they won't be able to live there anymore, let alone operate a business there. So it's thinking in that way, and not to mention that talent attraction, which is really fundamental. How do you keep the talent and skills within your business to keep going? And suppliers, they're also wanting to keep this. It's all scales, doesn't it?
And transparency is key.
Yes.
Thank you, Deep. Thank you for talking about the supply chain. As always, interesting and vital to our industry. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you very much for joining us on this MTSS Vlogcast. We look forward to seeing you again soon.